Today is big question. What would happen if China cut off the rare earth elements that it provides to the United States? Rare earths are a group of 17 minerals used in everything from fighter jets to fertility treatments. But they've also been called the oil of the 21st century and weapons of mass economic destruction. And while that might seem like a problem since China and the US don't always see eye to eye politically, remember that international trade is pretty complex. There are lots of intermediary countries between any two given nations, which is part of why cutting off trade between any two countries is easier said than done. That means transporting them across the globe, further refining them in processing facilities, which are expensive to build and maintain. That processing then creates new products that can be incorporated into even more specialized manufacturing. So the fact that China controls such a large percentage of the market doesn't mean that they control all the steps of the process. They simply control the first step, which gives them a lot of leverage over the rest of the supply chain. So how have these minerals gone from mystical healing stones to geopolitical weapons? And will this affect you? Stay tuned to find out. They're used to strengthen steel to make computer chips to improve the brightness and efficiency of LED lights and solar panels, and to make high-strength magnets that are used in wind turbines, electric cars, headphones, microphones, lasers, and missile guidance systems. And processing were low-wage jobs with little safety net, often given to migrant workers who were denied basic labor protections. But it wasn't until recently that rare earths became a geopolitical issue. Rare earths are also used in alloys that resist corrosion, which makes them useful in everything from the pipes that carry oil to your home's water heater, to the tanks that store hydrogen fuel. Part of this strategy was based on the fact that for a long time, the United States didn't have any domestic rare earth mining. In fact, the Mountain Pass mine in California was the only rare earth mine in the country. It opened in 1987, but by 2002, it was losing money, and by 2005, it closed. Rare earths are extremely important for many modern technologies, but they're not impossible to replace. As we learn more about the world around us and how to use resources more efficiently, our needs and wants change. Rare earths might be critical right now, but they might not be in the future. The real question isn't whether rare earths will affect you. They already have. It's how much and in what ways. We can debate that question, but we shouldn't debate whether it's worth knowing the answer to. Over the last decade, European companies have invested heavily in developing substitutes for rare earths. If you want to help keep this content free for everyone forever, you can join our community on a crowdfunding platform. Electric car manufacturer Tesla, for example, recently announced that it'll stop using rare earths in its electric motors after developing a new design that relies on iron and nickel instead. They're even used to purify the uranium that fuels nuclear power plants. When the Mountain Pass mine was at its peak in the 1990s, it produced about 20,000 tons of rare earths per year. Eventually, in 2021, the mine reopened thanks to investments from China and the United States. But reopening the mine won't mean that the United States will be self-sufficient anytime soon. Even at full capacity, the Mountain Pass mine can only produce about 20,000 tons of rare earths per year. China, on the other hand, produces over 300,000 tons per year. By 2004, though, it was only producing about half of that. Its output was less than 10% of America's needs. The mine employed about 350 people directly and another 500 indirectly. But to continue operating, it would have needed to invest millions of dollars in new technology to keep mining viable. But because the mine was located in a seismically active area with a history of landslides, no one was willing to invest that money. So the mine closed. Japan, Korea, the US, and Germany each refine more than China. But that's because China sells refined rare earths to those countries. And while that's true, rare earths haven't exactly been a boon to the countries where they're mined. These minerals typically occur in low concentrations, so mining them is hard and expensive. And the processing of rare earths is incredibly toxic. So the government introduced new regulations limiting both the amount of rare earths that could be mined and the amount of waste that could be produced. They also implemented strict export limits, which raised prices on the world market and helped force rare earth processing back onto Chinese soil. It creates waste that can poison soil and water, forcing miners to spend lots of time and money cleaning up after themselves. For example, in 2010, after Japan arrested a Chinese fishing boat captain for crashing into a Japanese vessel near islands controlled by China but claimed by Japan, China banned the export of certain rare earths to Japan because the entire supply chain relied on these exports. This embargo had serious consequences for Japanese manufacturers. It couldn't continue forever, though, because China needed the money it earned from selling rare earths, so the embargo only lasted a few months. In fact, the earliest evidence we have of rare earth use comes from as early as the Bronze Age in the form of burials in China. Archaeologists believe that these particular burials were reserved for members of the ruling class who could afford these rare elements, which suggests that rare earths may have been used as symbols of wealth and power. During the Han Dynasty, people believed that some rare earth elements could cure illnesses and extend lives, so they were used in traditional medicine. One grave even had writings explaining how to make an elixir of life using several rare earth minerals, and because these materials are so valuable, that means that China has a lot of power when it comes to international relations. In fact, today, mesh metal, an alloy containing several rare earth elements, is still used to make flints and to ignite lighter fluid, and it wasn't until the 20th century that we really started putting them to good use. Today, rare earths are used in everything from the rechargeable batteries in cell phones and laptops to the alloys that strengthen jet turbine blades. This is Crash Course Geography, episode 498, Rare Earths Then and Now from the Bronze Age to the Tech Wars. Before we get into today's topic, we do like to acknowledge that we are making this episode during the same week as the People's Republic of China's National Day, at the start of their 13th five-year plan period. The rare earth elements, or rare earths, are a set of 17 minerals that include the 15 lanthanides on the periodic table plus yttrium and scandium. Despite their name, they are not necessarily rare in terms of abundance on Earth. Some are more common than others, but all are concentrated in specific places around the world. So despite their widespread use, there are only a few places that can mine them. In fact, China is responsible for about 70% of the world's production of rare earths. Now, rare earths aren't just mined in one place. The Democratic Republic of the Congo is the second largest producer of rare earths, although most of those come from one specific mine that accounts for about 30% of the world's cobalt production. Other mines in the Congo produce significant quantities of other rare earths, and mines in Australia, India, and Sri Lanka also contribute to global rare earth supplies. China's dominance in rare earth production comes from mines scattered throughout the country, with the largest being the Bayan Obo complex in the Inner Mongolia region. But because these minerals are so useful, we need to concentrate them before they can be used. For example, while China produces about 70% of the world's rare earths, they refine only about 60% of it. Rare earths have been used for thousands of years in traditional medicine, but it wasn't until the Middle Ages that people started to understand the chemical properties of rare earth elements and put them to use in things like pigments, ceramics, and glass. It was until the 19th century that scientists began to fully isolate and identify the different rare earth elements. In fact, many technologies that we rely on today rely on rare earth elements because of their wide variety of uses. It is estimated that 1 kilogram of rare earth elements has twice the impact on a nation's economy as does 1 kilogram of gold. And for a long time, most of the jobs in rare earth mining in the early 2000s, China noticed that its rare earth mines were being depleted and that the processing was creating huge environmental problems without bringing in much money. Since then, China has imposed export bans on rare earths as a way of getting other countries to do what it wants them to do. Since then, China has threatened to weaponize rare earths again in conflicts with Vietnam, South Korea, Japan, and the United States. The reason it went out of business is a good example of the sorts of challenges that rare earth miners face. The U.S. government considered purchasing the mine to keep it open, but instead they just subsidized the domestic producers who relied on it for materials. So even though China wields incredible economic and political power over rare earths, it isn't absolute. So while the U.S. might not be able to compete with China's production of rare earths, it can work on reducing its dependence on them. Thanks for watching this episode, which was filmed at a studio and made with the help of all these nice people.